Hello, and welcome to another lecture. This is week 2, or the Abrahamic traditions, the Abrahamic medieval thought week. And we're going to explore three thinkers who take after the Abrahamic tradition. We have the Jewish tradition under Maimonides, we have the Christian tradition under Aquinas, and of course we have the Islamic tradition under Al-Farabi. So if you go to the study guide, we're going to note a few things. Maimonides and knowledge, Maimonides' divine rule and the role of religion, Aquinas and the state of innocence, Aquinas and overthrowing a tyrant, Aquinas and forms of government, and then we have Al-Farabi and Christian philosophy, and Al-Farabi and a happy society. And these answers that you will go through, this content is reflected in the readings, and as well as I'm going to cover them in this brief lecture. So let's begin with Maimonides. So Maimonides is part of the Jewish tradition, and he holds that the law is a political device. And what that means is that the law has a function. And a political device is anything that helps to shape the behavior of people in a way that is good. So it's to create good people. It's to ensure that virtue is expressed. And as you read the readings for this week, Maimonides, Aquinas, and Al-Farabi, you'll realize that they all are part of the Abrahamic tradition, but they all draw heavily on the Greek philosophical traditions of Plato and Aristotle. So that's what I meant by when I said in last class that Plato and Aristotle are the bedrock, the foundation of modern political thought, because they've been so influential. And so when we say that law is a political device, or in the case of Maimonides, the Torah, the Jewish law, is philosophical in a sense of it is trying to establish a political program that's based on, or it's tried to create morality, moral law, and have people practice that moral law regularly. So in order to be good, in order to if you follow the Torah, if you follow the religious law, you are following the secular law. You're becoming a good citizen, and ultimately you create wise and understanding people. So that's essential. So the law creates wise people. It creates good people, and the religious law. When I say law, I mean religious law. And so when we study the Torah, when we study any religious text, you can consider it a political device, and that political device is essentially used to create a virtuous society. So to say that a bit differently, the law, the religion in general, according to Maimonides, religion creates good people, subservient people to the rule of law, and that creates a virtuous society. So religion leads to the good life according to Maimonides. And one of the things he talks about is festivals, this idea of festivals. So why would a festival be important, like a religious festival, like, I don't know, Yom Kippur, or in the Christian sense, Easter, Christmas? Why would that be a good thing? Well, Maimonides says that festivals are important to establish friendship and community and society, and you create that common bond that links everyone together. And so this helps us remove some of the obstacles that bar one another, because we can identify with one another, and it helps create a cohesive society. So if people see that there's something in common, if we all have something in common with one another, then ultimately we will act kindly with one another. So we're going to we establish friendship, we establish that bond with each other, and that is supposed to run against the lower passions of man. So, man, we have obstacles in our lives according to Maimonides, and in order to remove these obstacles, we have to replace it with something, and that something is knowledge of the law. And so when we talk about the law, we talk about it as a way, as a political device to establish those connections and to create that the goodness, the virtue that is so necessary for a good society. And so these devices, when you think about political devices, think of it as a way in which to generate good, positive behavior, to motivate good action and good behavior. So that the legislation or the laws that come into it, that is to try to avoid doing wrong, and to, rather than doing wrong and being mired in those lower passions, that we acquire love and pity and generosity. And that is the greatest purpose of the law according to Maimonides. And the Torah, as a political device, helps establish and foster those good character traits. That is the essential value of Maimonides' work. So when we think about that, the political law, this divine ruse, it's supposed to kind of, not to trick you, but to make you be good. And that's one of the functions of the law, is to ensure that we all behave in a way that is virtuous. And that is the most important thing for Maimonides and for us, for this course to understand, is that when we think about knowledge that is acquired might help us overcome our lower estate. And so when you think about the way in which laws are set up and how we tend to understand one another, we go back to those very basic traits of trying to be better people. And that helps establish moderation. So knowledge of the law, knowledge of the Torah, knowledge of the divine rule, the divine rules, it helps you guide to ensure moderate behavior in eating and drinking and sexual intercourse. All of these things are to help benefit the moral life according to Maimonides. So again, are people good? No, people are not good. Human nature is not good, but good laws may create good people. And that's the essential aspect, or that's the value that Maimonides presents to us. So in summation here, we by ourselves cannot resist our lower based instincts, but if we use our intellect to understand that there is to understand the bigger picture, that we might be able to enact ways to overcome our baseless, evil human nature, and through the Torah we can help tamp down those desires. And so that's the value of Maimonides' work in terms of the divine rules, political knowledge, the purpose of the law, and so on. So we're going to turn to Aquinas now, and Aquinas is part of the tradition, the Christian tradition, the Catholic tradition, and the question becomes, the first question for Aquinas is, what is the state of innocence? The state of innocence is that which existed in humankind before there was sin. So it was a period where there was no sin. And Aquinas asked the question of, would inequality exist under the state of innocence? And Aquinas says no. Inequality exists in the state of innocence because of the gift of free will. So think about Genesis. Man sinned. Humankind sinned. They made that decision to disobey God. And because of this, even if Adam said no, that we would, we're not going to eat the apple and we're just going to stay on the path. The fact is that because we have free will, there are going to be people who are going to make mistakes. Because of free will, we're going to choose to not do what's right. So some of you are listening to this lecture. You're doing all the good things. You're looking at the study guide. You're reading the texts per week. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work. I am sure there's some of you, when you're watching this right now, it's possible that you've left this for the last minute as you prepare for your midterm and you are scrambling. So you chose to do this. This was your choice. And so there's going to be those people who get A's, and there's going to be those people who get C's or B's. And so inequality exists naturally, even in the state of nature. And this creates this idea of man dominating other men. So there's going to be ruled, and those who are ruled, and those who are the rulers. But the purpose of the ruler is to direct people to the common good. And because we are political animals, page 5, last paragraph, then we have to be able to deal with one another and live with one another in a way that is good. So the king or the ruler is supposed to direct the actions of the whole toward a good end. And because man is by nature a political animal who lives in the community, we need that direction. We need good people in power so they can show us the way. And of course, there's always going to be social disorder, according to Aquinas. If you look on page 7, he says that if it's natural for man to live in fellowship, there's going to be those people who are being ruled, but because there's a ruler because there needs to be those people who are directed toward that common good. And not everyone is going to be toward or be united in that cause, united with respect to that common good. There's going to be differences across in individuals. And so there needs to be something that promotes the common good. So just like Maimonides, this divine ruse of direction toward a good, the divine, being a part of that celestial being and those celestial bodies, I think that's the whole thing about Aquinas. We need to be directed toward that common good and toward that ruling principle. And we do need that lordship. We do need a government that is ruled justly. Because if we don't have that rule that directs us to the common good, then bad things are going to happen. So bad things are going to happen if we have tyrants. And one of those things that can happen in tyrants is that there's going to be people who are going to think that it's a good idea to overthrow the state. We're going to get to that point right now, in a while. Aquinas does not believe in democracy. Aquinas believes that it is best for one person in power to rule, and that one person should be led by God and to achieve and promote the well-being and the preservation of unity and peace throughout the entire world. And so that promotion of divination and goodness will reduce divisions and promote unity. Democracy cannot achieve that end, according to Aquinas, because there's going to be basically it's going to be divisions, and those divisions will create disorder and chaos. So there's going to be those people who disagree with what's right and what's true, and they want to go their own way. So Aquinas is saying we need one person who is divinely inspired to rule. That's the important thing. Aquinas says that the monarchies are good. They're the best course of action. However, there's going to be tyrants. And tyranny is bad because tyranny produces bad behavior. If you look at page 13 and 14, tyrants therefore endeavor to prevent their subjects from becoming virtuous and increasing in nobility of spirit, lest they refuse to bear their unjust dominion. So what does that mean? That means that because people are being oppressed, their virtue are going to be reduced, and though they're preventing, the tyrant prevents virtue, and there's going to be those people who refuse to bear that unjust domination. But that's very dangerous for Aquinas, because if you look at chapter 7, removing a tyrant, you don't know if you remove that tyrant, who's going to replace that tyrant. So sometimes you're so sick of a ruler that you decide to kick him out. But sometimes that ruler, it was better for that tyrant because what came after is horrible. Look at the Iranian Revolution. The Shah of Iran was a tyrant. He oppressed people with their internal security forces. There was torture. The economy was a corrupt country. And so people got together and they said, we're going to have a revolution. We're going to overthrow the tyrant. And what did they get? They got the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is even more tyrannical than the Shah. So people now are longing for the days of the Shah. So Aquinas says we have to be tolerant of a tyrant because we do not know who will replace. And he says, of course, there are certain occasions where removing a tyrant turned out to be a positive. But sometimes it's just you can't risk it. As a person who is very careful with making decisions, you have to understand that even though you're suffering now, you don't know what you're getting involved with. And so, as the saying goes, it's better to have the devil you know than trade that devil for one you don't know. All right, that's the essential message of Aquinas. So again, to recap Aquinas, we have this idea of the state of innocence that existed, and inequality would exist in the state of innocence because it's this idea of free will. And of course, you had the divisions of the form of government, democracy, and monarchy. And Aquinas, of course, would much rather a just monarch that's grounded in what the goodness of the Christian religion, according to Aquinas, rather than having democracy, because democracy cannot promote that unity. It's not unified. It's not efficient. Democracy, according to Aquinas, is not unified. It's not efficient. So, and when it comes to trading in a tyrant, he would not advise it. And so that's Aquinas. And so we did 2/3 of the week thus far. Maimonides and Aquinas. They both take a lot from Aristotle, as you may note. And so now we're turning to Al-Farabi. And Al-Farabi comes from the Islamic religious tradition. And Al-Farabi is definitely grounded in the work of the Greek philosophy, because he's also trying to figure out what is the perfect state. So he's trying to explore mechanisms by which people can be governed more perfectly. And this is a Platonic effort. He's trying to imagine the ideal. So if you remember from last lecture, we talked about the idea of the ideal. So what's up there, not what's down there. So he's trying to recall what's the best way of doing so. And so he recalls the idea of the philosopher king. And this is an idea from Socrates and Plato. So Socrates says that we should be governed by the philosopher king, who is an enlightened ruler who can create the goodness, a good society, who seeks wisdom and is connected to that higher power, to God, and he will create good people. So just like Maimonides and Aristotle and of course Aquinas, they all see good leaders as generating good people. So virtuous leaders, a virtuous state will create virtuous people. And so what does Aristotle say about this? So the government, Aristotle says the government is made up by citizens, and good citizens create a good society. And Al-Farabi agrees with this. Al-Farabi takes that and says goodness through Islam, through spiritual education, and the citizens being educated by the ruler being the philosopher king who sets the example, can create good people. And so the values through philosophical and religious efforts will create a peaceful, more cohesive and unified society. And Al-Farabi says this is completely universal. He says you don't have to have an Islamic government to have a good philosopher king. All that philosopher king needs to do is to be good, to understand the relationship between man and the higher power, and this may help achieve perfection. And again, this is borrowed from the Greek philosophers. And so when you think about Aquinas and Maimonides, but specifically Aquinas, he's borrowing from that Christian tradition and incorporating that into the Islamic perspective. And so, yes, we are political animals, and to understand the relationship with a higher power is essential for achieving that perfect society. And so, by this way, an ideal state will be created through the creation of one organism, and the ruler will create that new perspective, that new world order. And so that's how you would go about it. To create a happy society, you need a good ruler, and that good ruler generates good people. So for this week, we have to underscore the major understanding that all three say that good laws can shape the behavior of people. So good laws create good people, and to be grounded in goodness creates goodness. So virtuous leader, virtuous laws create virtuous people. And this supposes that human nature is evil, right? But it's malleable, right? So that's the important thing. And so that's the Abrahamic traditions during the medieval period. We covered 3 of them. So make sure when you're doing the readings that you focus on those concepts in the study guide and you use this lecture to help. Maybe you want to listen to the lecture twice. Once before you do the reading, and the second time after you do the reading, and always consult that study guide. So again, thank you for your attention, and be well, and look out for lecture 3.